Welcome back to another episode with Chronicles with Kat. I am your host, Kat. Today, I have the beautiful and amazing Electra Solis with us.
Hi.
Welcome. So today's story is going to be about teenage pregnancy and how that shapes your life after. And Electra's story was actually a very unique one. And I actually just found out about it recently. I was like, oh my gosh, you need to be on the podcast. So I'm going to let her introduce herself and let her know what she does within the community, and then let her tell her story.
Hi, I'm Electra Solis, and I am an advocate for the teenage women in Houston. I think it's very important that minority women and low-income girls have the access and availability to resources such as mentorship, and just to know that they have someone that could guide them to a brighter future.
So tell us what you do outside of that. So
Okay.
what is...
So what I do outside of that, I'm a natural hustler. So I work an 8-to-5 job in oil and gas. I've been doing that for about 15 years now. And I also have the Glamour House Studios. The Glamour House Studios is my side hustle, and it's one of my passions. And it's been in business for about 8 years now. 8 to 10 years.
So if you've been watching along since the beginning, you can tell the difference in my makeup. Today, I was like, Electra's always the type that's like, hey, you want me to do your makeup? And I'm like, for the podcast? And I was like, well, I'm not going to say no for you doing my makeup because, hello, she does amazing. She cleans up nice, guys. So I met Electra. I think I met you through my sister, Patty.
Yes, through Patty.
And I think it was an event for Houston Boss Babes. And you were doing her makeup and you're like, oh, I'll do yours too. Or I think maybe you just, I think
it was something of that sort. Yes.
So literally I met her with her doing my makeup. That is how I met her. And I fell in love like with her and with her makeup. But Electra's just like, you're just this kind soul. Like I gravitate. She's also a Scorpio. So that's probably why I gravitated to her too. But here during, what was that weekend? The Houston...
Metas.
Yeah, La Metas Fest. We were talking, we were catching up, and I was telling her about the podcast. And then she shared her story with me. And I laying down? I don't even know where. I don't know if we were sitting on the couch and I just turned and looked at her and I was
yes, we were on the couch and you looked at me and you're like, oh my gosh.
You need to be on the podcast. So I wanted her to share her story of what happened as a younger teen and how it shaped her life and where she is now.
Yes. So I'm a very conservative person, I would say.
Very.
In the light. And a lot of people think that I'm just this natural person that has it all figured out. But in reality, I'm human and I do have a past just like anybody else. And growing up with a single mom, it was really hard to navigate through life. And I think we can all relate to that. My mom was, and I'm not bashing my mom, so if she sees this, like, I'm not at all, but she had her own life going on. So I had to raise myself, and my grandma was present at that time throughout my entire life, which I wouldn't have the structure that I have placed in my life throughout the years if it wasn't for my grandma, which I do share my grandma a lot on my Instagram, more than my mom, because I have to thank my grandmother a lot for molding me into who I am. So with my mom being not present in my life the way you and I are with our daughters. Like we're very present. We're very vocal with them. They're very vocal with us.
Yes.
Probably more than a lot of parents. The communication is a big thing, and I didn't have that. So with my mom not being home and my dad not being present, I looked for love in all the wrong places.
Looking for love in all the wrong places.
And it started out like, I didn't like boys really in the beginning. Like, throughout middle school, like I really didn't care for them. I'd rather have smoked a joint than talk to a boy.
Like the boy crazy wasn't there.
It was not there until like one of my friends were like, come on, this guy likes you, whatever. And I was like, no, I was like, that's not my thing. And then I ended up falling for it. I ended up dating my first boyfriend for at least 3 years.
Wow. How old were you?
I was 13 when I started dating him.
Wow.
And
13 and dated for 3 years.
Yes.
That's not really
common.
No.
Yeah. It's not common at all. But I think that him and I leaned on each other because of child trauma and like abandonment. So it's more like a trauma bonding, especially kids that age. So we fell in love. I guess it was love. I can't say that I even knew what love was, but whatever. And I ended up getting pregnant.
How old were you when you got pregnant?
I was 14.
Wow.
And at first I was embarrassed of my story because everyone's like, wow, that's so young. But it's actually really common.
Very common.
And especially in our culture.
Yeah.
And I was like, a lot of my family members like looked down on me, and friends of the family looked down on me. And it was really embarrassing for me, especially going back into school and being pregnant. So it was kind of traumatic for me, and it became like a dark place for me because I actually didn't find out I was pregnant till I was 6 months. And it was my mom that pointed it out. And
and I think also I can attest to this. Like a lot of Hispanic families, at least I'm going to speak on mine, right? Like we don't talk about like menstrual cycles and like, I mean, my mom got kissed for the first time, French kissed for the first time and thought she was pregnant. So like, I mean, like it's just not really talked about. And even with my daughter, I was like, I had the doctor explain everything to her because I was like, this is new territory for me. So, I mean, 14, you're pregnant, you really don't know about like.
No, you don't. Because you don't have, I think in our culture, we shut down when it comes to big topics, life topics.
Like if it's taboo to talk about it.
And you have to be open with your children. You have to be open with other family members as well. If they're young, like be that outlet for them. And we need more of that in both the male and female youth.
Yes.
And we don't have a lot of that. So I talk to my daughter all the time. Like it's very important for me to talk to her about these things. So I found out. And
so what did your mom say?
My mom knew like my stomach was getting rounder. Like I was really skinny. So my stomach was getting rounder. And then she said that she could just tell my face and stuff. So she takes me to a doctor. I find out I'm having a boy. Like this all bombarded me at one time. I wasn't even with the guy anymore. Like we had already broken up and stuff. So I had to like accept all of this at one time.
Wow.
And
you're pregnant.
You're
6 months pregnant.
Except
you're having a boy.
You're having a boy.
And you're a single mom.
And I'm a single mom. And I had already kind of like moved on, and this other guy was like so in love with me, and he was so crushed. He's like, why didn't you tell me? Like, how could this have happened? I said, I didn't know. I'm sorry. And he was so mad. So going back to school and having to tell that, because it was like after Christmas break, it was embarrassing. It was very humiliating for me because I was one of the, not to like, because I'm very humble, so don't take this wrong. But I was one of the popular pretty girls at school, and it was hard because I was never gonna be that, or I thought that, right?
Yeah. Well, then you have so many people looking up to you. Mind you, you're at 14, so this is, if I can remember back, like all of this is like this is your life.
Yes.
So, and you're 14, you're finding out, you're going back to school. How did kids treat you?
So they kind of looked at me different, which I did go to more of like a charter school. So it was kind of common for girls to be pregnant, or there was even girls that were like on probation. So it was normal. And a lot of the kids were from the inner city. So it was not like I was in the suburbs or anywhere. So some of them did make it very comfortable. I did have a lot of friends that looked out for me. But then I also did have like a group of girls that pointed and laughed. And even boys, even the guy that I thought liked me, he would like start laughing and like be such a douche. And I went back to school with the mindset, just keep to myself. So I kept to myself. I actually was 14 already in the 9th grade.
Oh, wow.
So my plans were to graduate by the time I was 16 years old, which I've always had that ambition. I kind of always knew like the life that I wanted for myself. And I had the baby on May 20th, and I stopped going to school for about 2 to 3 weeks, and I went to summer school because I had told my mom, I was like, I have to go back to school. Like, that's the only way, like, I'm going to stay on track to what I plan on doing. Mm-hmm. And I went back and I rode the bus. So I grew up on this side of town where the podcast is, from the age of 10 till I was like 20 something. And I was not living, because I ended up getting back with the guy, and I was not living with my mom. I was living with him because his aunt could watch the baby while I went to school. So I rode the bus from Northside on Fulton, right by the salon. Mm-hmm. And I was riding Metro back and forth to school. And I went back and I was like, I was a little chunky, not my normal self, which is normal.
After pregnancy, yes.
And the kids at school, I remember they're like, well, are you still pregnant? And I was like, no.
How mean.
Like, no. And I was like, it takes time. I was like, give me some time. And that just crushed me. That crushed me so much because my hormones were changing. Yeah. Like, and I was like not used to anything at all. But I stuck with it. I ended up missing one day of summer school. I believe it was like June 21st or 22nd. And I missed that day of school because the baby was sick. And I helped my mom raise my sister. So I was pretty good at like being motherly. Mm-hmm. But I remember missing that day of school. And he wasn't feeling good. And I remember holding him. And I tried to block, for a lot of years, I blocked a lot of this out.
It's the trauma. Mm-hmm. It's the way your brain helps you like protect yourself.
Yes. And I remember holding him, and I think he had colic because babies have colic at that age. Now I know that.
He was about 2 months old?
He was a month old.
Oh, okay.
He just turned a month. And I remember holding him and being like, oh, I can't, like, I should have never did this. I don't know what to do. And like changing a diaper, because I really didn't have to do all that because I was at school like all day. And then when I went home, like we had a lot of help. The guy, but his family was very helpful. And I wasn't used to that because I didn't run from it, but I was just trying to make a better life. And I was like, oh, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm sorry I brought you to this world. And little did I know that would actually be my last day as his mom. And we went to bed, and the most convenient thing was for us to put the baby like in the middle of us and roll over feed it. And his aunt would come in and check on the baby, check on us. And I just remember being woken up, and I might cry, which I have a hard time crying.
It's okay.
I have such a hard time crying.
I think it's a Scorpio thing. I have a hard time crying too. Not to like take some light away, but my therapist is always like, have you cried? Have you released? And I'm like, nope.
Andrea tells me that too. Like, I don't know why. I
honestly do think that it's part of our culture. Like, I feel like they have taught us like crying shows weakness, but it's not. Crying is actually a form of release.
Yes, it is. You need to cry.
Yeah. So it's okay if you cry when you're telling your story.
So she went to go check on the baby and she woke me up. She's like, he isn't breathing. And so I like get up immediately, and I remember grabbing him and doing what I knew my instincts were to like do CPR, right? So I tried to do CPR, ambulance, and I just remember holding him. And then I just kind of went into shock, like complete shock. And at that time, you know, I would have liked to have had my family, like my mom there. But I was not living with her at that time. And of course, she rushed to the hospital, and so did my family. And it was also traumatic too, because the father figure that I did have, which was my brother, he wasn't there and he couldn't be there. And it was a lot already going on with my family, which I try to make excuses for my mom, because my brother was in a federal prison. He had just got indicted at that time. So my mom was already going through a lot. And I don't even remember my dad was there, honestly, now that
But he was there?
I don't know if my dad was there at the hospital, but I just remember going into complete shock. And then after that, it was kind of like a daze for me for months, for years, for actually a year.
So at the hospital, I mean, when y'all arrived, was the baby gone already?
Yes, the baby was pronounced dead already.
And did they say what happened? Is it SIDS?
Yes. And I didn't know about, like, I didn't know anything about any of this until afterwards. And I was so crushed, like, because even women our age, they haven't even experienced that. So for a 14-year-old girl to experience that and not have the support system that she needed and the guidance that she needed was very hard, because grief itself is traumatic.
I mean, it looks different for everyone, right? Like some people don't show any type of grief unless they're behind closed doors. Other people, they don't deal with grief like at all. Some people will, they just go into like protective mode. And so like you won't remember certain things, or sometimes you'll be talking about whatever the trauma is. And then you'll start realizing, like, I feel like your body knows when to allow you to start remembering those things.
Yes.
But 14 and losing your firstborn, how... I can't even fathom as a 40-year-old, right? I'm a little older than 40, but a 40-year-old, I can't like, just the thought of it makes me want to cry, right?
Yes.
Like at 40, I cannot begin to imagine at 14 how impactful that was.
It was so, it was crazy. Like, I spent the summer, of course, like, I turned to drugs and numbing myself. But my brother ended up coming out on bond because we needed him at that time. And I was turning 15, and my family still celebrated me, like and15, going back to school. They were very proud of me, like, because I had to pick myself up. And me and the guy ended up staying together, but my mom like highly recommended that I go back home and he stays home and we get adjusted to life reality. So I went back to school, and he was very upset about that. But I wanted to go back to school because I had to stay on track. And I kept telling myself that. And even going back to school was, some days I couldn't focus and I ended up dropping out. And that was like really hard for me because I felt like it set me back so far from my future. And my future was something that I was very passionate about, because from 14, like, I was wearing high heels at school.
You don't hear that very often.
I was wearing high heels. Like, I had like big dreams. I wanted to be like a fashion merchandiser for like a big corporate company. I wanted to live in New York or LA. Like, I didn't want to be here. And I just felt like my life was getting pushed back, and depression came in. And I think like depression is something that takes a big part of grief and if you don't get the help that you need. And at that time, my mom was so occupied with everything else in her life. She prayed. She took me to church. So I can't say she gave me faith. And I ended up taking antidepressants at that time too, because a doctor recommended that I get on antidepressants. My teachers were amazing. They all passed me out of my classes because I was smart. I was like really smart.
Did all your teachers know your story as well?
Yes. And they showed me a lot of grace, a lot. Even the principal, like they showed me so much grace, and I'm very appreciative of all that. And as I took the antidepressants, which I never, I mean, maybe I did, but it wasn't for that reason.
Understood.
But the antidepressants they gave me actually made me more depressed.
Really?
Yes, they didn't help me. And I became to have like suicidal thoughts. Ooh. And I didn't know how to control it. Like I called my mom, and it's around the time I dropped out. I was like, Mom, I can't do this anymore. Like, there's no way I could possibly go on like this. I was like, it's too much for me. And she's like, I'm coming, please. Just wait for me, please. And just telling that story and remembering that, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
And I have always needed my mom. And I have to admit that. I think every child needs their mother to be in their lives and to be presently there, fully involved to them, not just when something hits the fan.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it could have been too late.
Yeah.
It could have been too late. And again, we can't put all the blame on our moms, but at the same time, when a human or anything comes out of your body, that's your responsibility.
Agreed.
For its life, for its entire life. And I finally got it together. I separated from the guy. Mm-hmm. He had his own traumas and everything, and he has his own story. I respect him and his story, so I won't really share any of his story. But I moved on, and it took me a while, but I ended up moving on. And I went back to school. I ended up going back to summer school the following year. And I always celebrated my son, like through birthdays, Christmas. And it was his anniversary. It's a 1-year anniversary. And I wanted to be with the father. I wanted to celebrate that with him. Well, I ended up taking the bus, the metro.
Oh, that metro. It saved us
everywhere.
It saved us when we were teens.
Now I wouldn't recommend it, but I ended up going to his house, and he had like another woman there, like an actual woman. And I was like so crushed. So that brought me back down to the big depression. So that summer, I spent my time completely isolated. I found things. I had to learn these things by myself, like how I was going to pick myself back up. So I was always in survival mode, and I still find myself to this day in
that
survival.
fight or flight kicks in bad.
I had to get it together. So I said, okay, what am I going to do? I ended up riding the bike during the summer. So I'd ride like all in the neighborhood. I had to find sources that were going to help me with the grief, with the depression. I ended up drawing, painting, listening to music, watching movies. My grandma, whatever I wanted, she gave me. She just didn't want to see me sad. And herself, she didn't know how to make me happy. Yeah. But she bought me, she's like, here, I can buy you this. I can do this for you. And I just took it. I was like, okay, grandma. It did make me happy. But when I went back home, I'd get back in my depression. And
was therapy ever talked about?
It was. I actually did go to therapy for like maybe 2 sessions. And I even went to like a grief counseling. The therapy helped. But because at that age, I wasn't driving yet. I didn't have the like
transportation,
transportation.
And the times were different, right? Like now they have virtual appointments. So like it's, well, thanks to COVID, honestly, because before, but yeah.
So my mom, I mean, she tried, right? I mean, she has our parents, which we have to show them a little grace. They have their own traumas, and they have their own stories, and they kind of just do what they're taught. And so I will show her some grace, but she did try, and I went to Lakewood for their grief counseling with other women that lost children through miscarriages or similar stories to mine, but these were women. I was a child.
Yeah.
And their grief was completely different than my grief. Completely different. So I couldn't really relate to them. I told my mom, I'm not going back there at all. I was like, I'll come to church, but I'm not going back to that.
So what was the moment that you finally found, like, I guess I'll say peace? Because I think grief, regardless, like, I mean, you can talk about it now, and grief, to me, like, grief comes in waves, right? Like, you'll be fine, all of a sudden you'll come crashing, you know? So how old were you, and what was that pivotal moment that you found, quote unquote, some peace, and you said, this is what I'm going to do, move forward? And then also, when did you decide that you were going to start helping, you know, our community with the young girls?
I would say I end up, I mean, it took me a while, right? So I ended up dating this guy, and he became very abusive to me. And that was my outlet to take away my pain.
Oh, wow.
Which is weird, right? But psychologically, it will make sense because I don't want to think about what happened to me and the loss and the grief. So this person that was abusive, I was just connected to that abuse to take my mind off of what was really killing me inside.
Yeah.
And I guess that relationship woke me up, that I could not run from my problems and not escape it through a source of abuse.
Yeah.
And it's for a long time, I mean, in school and stuff, he was older than me. So I don't know why, I can't tell you, but psychologically, that's what helped me recover.
Yeah.
And it was odd. I know it is, but I ended up going through that and getting out of it, picking myself back up. And from there, I was like, you know what? No, nothing's going to stop me. No one, anybody, nothing, no grief, no depression. And I kept going. And I've always made money. Money is like, makes me happy. And I finished school and I got my first office job. And I said, you know what? I'm going to be unstoppable from here. And I was. And I mean, I just grew. Like, I hustled my way up, and I ended up having my daughter at 21, which was a surprise to me because that was not a part of my plan or anything like that. But getting a second chance at being a mom was very important for me. I did. Sometimes my grief did pop up from time to time. And even before my daughter, I had to face, I think it was 18, I had to face grief one more time. And that was with the loss of my dad. So everything was like so back to back for me. I never really had a moment to breathe. And having my daughter and raising her, some of that trauma came back up. As you're a parent,
like the fear of like losing her,
or like, am I doing the right thing? And still needing my mom. I still felt like I needed my mom to show me certain things. And again, she was not really present, but I had to learn how to be a mother by myself. And some people judged me because also now that I think about it, I didn't want to get too close to her because I'm like, it's like, oh, I love you, but like, I'm scared to love again or to like hold you, and then the chance of not having you. So it took me a while. I didn't go through like maybe I did, but not bad. What is it? The postpartum. I can't
the
say
mommy blues.
I can't say I really did.
It was just more of like your past, like what you dealt with that went through that.
Yes. And I told myself, I was like, okay, you're a mom now. And I worked and I said, you're never going to go without. I'm never going to go without. We're going to get through this. And her dad, Jazz's dad, is amazing to her. He's so amazing. He's a great father. And I'm so thankful for that because it's good to have a good both mom and dad.
Yes.
It's very important, especially for a girl.
Yeah.
Like, I really never knew I needed that, like, both mom and dad in my life. And raising her showed me that more and more, that I needed both of my parents or some kind of guidance in my life. But then I was able, and I learned so much and struggled so much at 20, my early 20s, being a mom.
Yeah.
And I worked my ass off through corporate America, and Jazz, I mean, I gave her everything, and we traveled and bought my first house when I was 25 years old.
It's amazing.
And I opened the business. I think I was like 28, 29. And it just grew. Like, we're growing. It did slow down for us, of course, because of COVID. And then also for me, I had to take a step back because grief can reappear in your life.
Oh, absolutely.
In certain stages of your life. And that's something that we don't have no control of.
Right.
And what I realized too is, like, I had to slow down at some point in my life and realize certain things and topics. But I'm very open with Jazz about my past.
Which is good.
Very open. And sometimes she'll tell me, and you know how kids are. She's like, do you remember what you were doing at my age?
Like, yes, I do. Sure do. I really do know.
And I'm like, yes, but you have both of your parents present. I didn't. So don't compare your story to mine, or don't compare your life to mine.
Yeah.
Because mine is very, very hard and traumatic compared to what you have, because you have everything compared to what I did.
And I see everything that you do for your daughter, and I love it. So let's move forward. So then, when did the mentoring happen? And tell me a little bit about that. And then, where can anyone find you for that? Your social medias.
Okay. So mentorship happened, I would say, like, earlier stages before Glamour House was, like, even born.
Really?
So, like, 27. I was about 27. I ended up volunteering at CIS for HISD, which is Communities in School. It's an amazing program.
It is an amazing program.
And I spoke to groups of teenage girls. It was always teenage girls. And I shared my story with them. And some of them cried. I cried with them. And a lot of them end up just gravitating towards me because it was relatable for them. I'm a girl from the hood. I'm a girl with a single parent. It was just like another ghetto story, I would say. And I hate to use that term, but this is realness.
Yeah.
And that's why they were able to take a liking to me and open up to me. And they shared a lot of things. And I ended up having to tell the counselor about a lot of things. I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize what I was doing. I just knew I had to share with them that they have a chance, and you just have to work hard at it and believe in yourself. So I ended up doing that. We ended up doing their prom hair. I got a team together to do prom makeup and hair. Same thing for the homecoming. I did that for about 2 years. Then I got really focused into building the business, which at that time was like selling makeup products with a makeup artist here in Houston. And then Glamour House came upon, and we still continued the same thing for a while. And we did giveaways at that time, like on social media. And a lot of the girls, they did come from single parents. And now what we do, which I haven't went back to CIS, and I know I need to, but I have to make sure that I'm grounded with myself.
Yes.
Because I'm aware that these girls are going to need a leader, and they're going to need a strong leader this time, even better than what I was before. I want to come back to them and really have all the resources for them. mental health resources for them. If they need jobs, I want to be more structured this time. Last time it was kind of like a freestyle. I want to offer more than just like our services to them because they need it. They need
all the resources.
They need health. They need wellness, everything. And when I get ready, I will let you guys know.
Yes.
But for now, we just do, we do work with a program where they have to take like a 6-week program, and then they come to our program. We teach them lashes and makeup. That way they have a chance to see what they want to do after high school.
And they have a job that they can be entrepreneurs.
Yes, that they can. And we just went to HCC, and a lot of the girls were young and some were older as well. And they're in the cosmetology program. And what I brought up to them, being in this industry or any industry, you have to have a checklist to check in mentally with yourself. And especially when you're interacting in the cosmetology setting, you're touching people, you're feeling them, you're transferring energies within each other. So it's very important that people have these resources. And you can find me at Electra_S and the Glamour House _HTX.
I love your story.
Thank you.
And I love that you shared it. And I'm loving that you cried because that means you're releasing, which is good. But I think your story is super important. And so like when you told me, like I said, when she told me, I was like, you have to be on the podcast because it's very impactful. I remember when I first met Electra, she was like, she's always been so quiet, very demure, very, you know. So when she told me the story, I was like, shut up, what? I would have never guessed it. But like she said, she is very conservative. But I've been seeing everything that she's been doing with the community. And I'm just so, like, from when I met you to now, you have grown so much. I'm so proud of everything that you're doing, how much you're growing, and the fact that you really have a heart and passion to, like, just help the community.
Yes, especially our youth.
Yeah,
they need it.
So thank you for coming on the podcast.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Know. Thank you for my glam, guys. You see, but yeah, thank you for coming and thank you for everything that you're doing. And we are going to make sure that we keep our audience in the know, the things that she's doing around the community when she gets back up with the program. But yeah, until next time. Bye, guys.